Hi everyone, my name is Dan and I'm a mental health pharmacist, and today I wanted to talk about photography as a form of treatment for mental illness. One of my favorite things to research is alternative treatments for mental illness, and today I wanted to spend some time talking about the clinical evidence that supports the use of photography as a treatment for mental illness and my own personal experience with photography. So I wanted to start with my own personal experience with photography because this is what gave me the idea and made me think that photography could be a useful tool in the treatment of mental illness. I picked up photography about 1 year ago. I would go to the local duck pond just as a hobby and spend hours trying to figure out how to use my camera. My pictures started out really bad, and what I found though, I was completely focused on the photography and would leave all my worries at home and wouldn't think about that at all because I was focused on the composition and getting the settings right on my camera. So hours and hours would go by. I wouldn't think about any of my problems. I was completely focused on the task, and I thought that this creative process would potentially be really helpful for mental illness, similarly to how music therapy and art therapy are helpful for mental illness. So speaking of music and art therapy for the treatment of mental illness, I wanted to go into a little bit of history. So creative therapies have been utilized for mental illness for thousands of years. Ancient Egyptian and Chinese medical texts mention the use of music as a healing treatment. In the 1940s, music therapy began to develop as an organized medical profession. Art therapy is another creative therapeutic approach with potential origins in the mid-20th century Europe. It first gained widespread use in tuberculosis wards to provide a creative outlet for patients, and it was shown to really help the patients with their overall mental health and their overall mental status. The history of photography is a lot shorter than some of the other arts, such as music, painting, and so on. Photography began in the 1830s in France, where the first permanent photograph was taken. Photography was not widely available until a company called Kodak was started in the 1880s. And what Kodak did was developed rolls of film to project the image onto rather than hard metal plates, which made the cameras a lot more smaller, compact, and easier to use. The World Wars really spurred how widespread photography was because people saw the power of sharing these images from the war and sharing the terrible things that happened during the war. Cameras continued to progress, and the first digital camera became available in 1991, and the first cell phone camera only became available in the year 2000. The widespread availability of cameras does not have a long history, but it does have an impactful one. Many people take photos for social media or their own personal photo albums, but the therapeutic use and the use of photography for mental illness is definitely still in its infancy. Photography includes many components that can be good for mental health. So often photography has people spending more time outdoors. A study from the University of Michigan found that spending 20 minutes outside 3 times per week was beneficial for anxiety and depression. The next benefit of photography is related to exercise and being active. Often hiking, climbing, or even just squatting is needed to get the best angle for the best photo. A study found that both aerobic exercise and resistance training 3 times per week improved anxiety scores within only 4 weeks. Mindfulness is also a component of photography. Staying present and focusing your attention on the subjects is needed to get the best photos. A study compared mindfulness to physical activity for 5 weeks during participants' lunch breaks, and both groups had less perceived stress at the end of the study. Finally, activating creative parts of the brain can be a helpful tool of expression. For example, one study found that art therapy decreased heart rate and anxiety while improving cognitive function. The overall evidence for photography for mental health is just emerging, but it may become a more common form of therapy because photography is more widespread these days and because of all these components that make up photography that may be helpful for mental health. Now I wanted to briefly review 3 trials to show some of the published evidence that supports photography as a treatment for mental illness. The first trial I wanted to talk about was a trial out of out of the United Kingdom that gave participants a disposable camera to take photographs of their experiences and perceptions of mental health. The participants were between the ages of 18 and 25, so relatively young, and were given 1 week to take 24 photographs of how they visualized their everyday experiences of mental health. Following that week, semi-structured interviews about the photography was conducted that allowed the participants to show their feelings and enrich their storytelling about their mental well-being. So in this trial, the study creators were using photography as a therapeutic approach that allowed the young participants to open up more about their experiences. A few images stood out to me. So one was empty benches from the participants' college. The participants said that the photo represented that they sometimes felt excluded at college and represents how they feel on their own. Another picture was a somewhat blurry makeup image. It was bright, colorful, and had pink throughout. And the participant stated that the makeup was significant because when they felt bad on the inside, they hid behind the makeup and used it as protection. This study showed a unique approach to help the therapist connect with the challenges of young people through the use of photography. Using a disposable camera is a relatively inexpensive way and may help clinicians to connect with their patients. The next study I wanted to talk about was an interesting study out of New York City. This used what the authors called Photovoice to help adolescents open up about their mental illness. Photovoice is a method that involves the use of cameras to visually capture their reality and express themselves through photography. This study included only 4 adolescents, so a relatively small trial. The first section was an introduction and gave participants 2 weeks to take photos. The second session was designed to share photos between the participants and discuss the photos. The individuals selected 5 photos each, and the third session included presenting the selected photos to the clinicians of the trial. One participant had a photo of tree branches illuminated by a sky and said the following: "What I thought is like a whole thing of darkness, and the holes are the light that you have to decide which path to go. There are millions of paths to take, different sizes, and you have to choose which one you will take." Another participant said the following about an image they took of a fountain with dirty water: "This water thing in front of my building, you can see it has litter and dirt and is tinted. I feel this is how it was there originally, to be something nice and pretty, something to add into it. But I feel like it some way it represents to me as it is life. As I was growing up, and I was just turning worse and worse, brownish with garbage in it." So this study concluded that giving adolescents space and photography and time helped them to share important insights about their conditions. Photovoice has the potential to be a therapeutic tool and a tool that therapists can use to connect with their young patients. The final study I wanted to talk about today was a study that used daily photography as a self-care method. 8 participants were recruited and utilized a photo-a-day site for 2 months. After that, the patients were interviewed. The participants acknowledged at the end of this trial that they thought photography could indeed be a form of self-care. One participant said, "Photography has been quite good for me over the years because I think it forces me to look at the world again. And there's also a postural thing. If you're only looking down when you're depressed and hunched over, it encourages you to look up or at least squat down and look at something different and to stop and smell the flowers. So I find it to be a very versatile self-care technique." Another said, "It's really good to be able to take that 5 minutes every day to do something slightly creative, which I enjoy doing, and I think it's good for well-being. It's positive and it gives me something to look for. Like I was saying earlier, with looking for novel experiences, I think it's very good for someone's well-being, so there's a lot that does contribute to it." Others contributed that it helps them to feel mindful and gives them a reason to get out of the house every day. So the authors concluded that a photo-a-day project can be a tool to improve mental well-being and connectivity between people. So in conclusion, widespread photography is becoming available. More people have cell phones, more people have access to something that can take photographs. With this widespread availability, I think that we will see more and more trials that use photography as a therapeutic tool to help with mental well-being. As you can see from the trials I talked about, this evidence is definitely still in its infancy. The 3 trials I presented today had small numbers of people completing the trials, but the participants definitely seem to notice some benefit from taking photography in regards to their well-being. I think that photography can be helpful for mental well-being because it includes all these components that are good for well-being, like going outside, exercising, connecting with people, being creative, all sorts of things. So I hope that this video was helpful, and thank you so much for watching.